Hello there, gun enthusiasts, preppers, and coin fanatics. Um, I was just going through some pennies because, I think I've done videos on in the past how I rummage through all our loose change to look for certain coins that might be a little better than usual, maybe wheat pennies or some older dates. Haven't found much silver lately. And I was going through pennies because I tend to pull out the wheat pennies, I pull out Canadians, I pull out copper pennies, and any other novelties that I might see. So I was going through this, and I was thinking about how I've gone to a lot of stores lately, and they have signs up saying, asking for exact change due to the national coin shortage. I find that kind of interesting that there'd be a national coin shortage. Again, if you might remember, there was one last year. Now there's seemingly another one. And it's not just small stores. Same thing happened at Walmart recently. They had all the self-check registers open, and then just like one or two with cashiers because you can use only debit and credit at the self-check, and then at the ones with cashiers you would get change back. So they wanted to limit the people, and the lines were really, really long. People were complaining because it was such a long wait because, out of like 20 registers, they only had two open. But I digress. It's really strange that there's an alleged coin shortage because you might guess that I don't believe it. In recent years, we've made probably just as much, if not more, coins at all the mints. I've checked it out, and the numbers seem to be kind of right on. And then the other funny thing is that people had said that because there wasn't as much economic activity for a while as far as people exchanging money in person, that the money wasn't circulating, and I think that's a load of BS because what would typically happen is, unless I'm mistaken, I don't think I am, the money is minted and it goes to the Federal Reserve. Federal Reserve fills in orders from banks. It goes to the banks. It goes from the banks to you, then you to the stores, and the stores to their banks, and it has this whole routine that it goes through. Well, if people aren't using change, then stores aren't taking the change to the banks. But they're also probably not giving it out either because then people aren't going in for actual change. So shouldn't it, at the very least, shouldn't it be in the Federal Reserve vaults? See, that's kind of what I think. I'm wondering if a lot of this change is just kind of tucked away in the Federal Reserve vaults, and they're doing it in order to encourage people to use cash and credit rather than using cash. A couple of reasons for this, because if cash went away tomorrow, I think that the government and the banks would be very, very happy. You wouldn't have anything to physically handle. You wouldn't have any physical transportation costs for it. You wouldn't have any time taken out to count it or purchase any type of money counting machines. But that's all the small stuff. I don't know if many are aware of this, but there's actually some people pushing to get rid of $100 bills because according to them, $100 bills are only used by bad people for bad things. Well, that's BS because I use $100 bills for certain things if it's going to be expensive and I'm paying cash. If I'm going to pay $200 for something, why not use two $100 bills? But they like to say that it's more compact because if you're going to put $100 bills in a briefcase, like let's say you're going to put $20,000 in a briefcase, it's a lot easier to put hundreds in than 20s. It's more compact, and I think that's BS, to be honest with you. So they're trying to get rid of hundreds. There's also, I believe, India and Europe has also moved to get rid of larger denomination bills. And keep an eye on this. And if you're not familiar with it, Google it. This is not some crazy thing. They are trying to make it so that it's harder to do certain transactions. And what better way than to first start by eliminating the larger transactions you might not make? You probably often spend $10 or $15 in a store at a time. How often do you go into a store and spend $500 though? Probably not too often. And you probably do use credit or debit for those things, but sometimes you might use cash. They're trying to make those more difficult. And then we have our reporting requirements that came about after 9/11. And the other problem with cash, as far as the government is concerned, is that they don't really know what you're buying or what you're doing with cash. They do know, or they could know if they really wanted to, through debit and credit. Debit and credit has all these transactions have long numbers attached to them. There's also, I mean, if you think about it, it's very, very possible that you could make it so that, there's a 30 digit number attached to a particular transaction or item or product. If it occurs in a grocery store, maybe it begins with 55555. If it occurs at a gun store, maybe it's 77777. Well, what you can do at some point is maybe Visa or MasterCard will say, we're not going to do business with any stores that have an ID beginning with 7777 because that means they sell guns. So now you can't use your debit and credit card because Visa says, well, we don't want to do that. Maybe MasterCard will say they don't. And then another credit card company will follow, and then another processor. It's very, very possible, and I think it's very likely. Now, some might listen to this and say, oh, that's just a conspiracy theory. And I think people who do that are ignorant because if you look at some of the things that have happened in the last, 5 or 10 years, I wouldn't put anything past the government. And I think that technology, the capabilities of technology are boundless, especially when it can be used to spy on people and help start to restrict them from doing things the government might not want them to do. Maybe buying ammunition, maybe buying firearms. Who knows what else it could lead to? I mean, that's one thing. And then the other thing is, don't forget this, is the banks love this because they're getting processing fees on everything. So if they're handling cash, they have to pay a company like Brinks to transport the cash. It has to be physically transported, stored, counted. They need larger buildings because it has to have a vault. If you're dealing with digital currency, you really don't even need cashiers anymore. You don't need tellers in the banks. You don't need armed guards to deliver it. You don't need to have as large a bank because people won't be going in very much. Maybe just for loans and whatnot, and even that, just probably signing papers because they can do most of it online, or just use digital signatures. And the best part is, they take a percentage of that. There are transaction fees on everything. So you spend $28 on your debit card, your banker gets maybe 2 or 3% of that. Okay, it's kind of like the mafia. They kind of got their hands in everything, and they get a piece of the action. And, I'd like to end with one other story that I found interesting. The bank that I deal with, I originally dealt with it. I've been with them for 20 years because they had local branches, pretty well distributed, but then they also had them in a local supermarket chain. Since COVID, they've been slowly closing all the local supermarket chains. The banks in all the local supermarket chains, I should say, and they've replaced them with ATMs. At their freestanding locations that were often open till 5 or 6 o'clock, well, guess what? They closed them down, and they're only open until like 4 o'clock on a lot of days, 12 on Saturdays. And those supermarket locations were fantastic because they were open till 6 or 7 o'clock at night, 6 o'clock on Saturdays, and like 3 o'clock on Sundays. Well, guess what? They're gone now. So all those extra locations, gone. The longer hours, gone. And like I said, the hours have been shortened at their regular branch times. It really sucks, I got to tell you. And then I went into a bank recently because I was withdrawing some money for some weekly bills and whatnot. And then I usually always take a little extra money to spend. And then I also ask if they have any $2 bills. Sometimes I'll get some ones because I like to save 1976 $2 bills because it's the year I was born. I just kind of like to save them. And I also look for star notes. And then sometimes I'll also get a few rolls of pennies to go through. And I was stopped. This time I didn't want any change, though. I just wanted some $2 bills. And I was stopped by someone who I believe was a manager and asked me how I was and said, what are you here for? Can I help you with this? And I said, because I was in line inside the bank, and I said, just withdrawing some money. He goes, well, you can go to the ATM. I said, well, the limit at the ATM is $500. I said, I'm withdrawing $800. Oh, well, you can actually increase that limit you want. I said, oh, really? That's great. So he told me how I could increase the limit. And I said, well, I'm here to get some $2 bills also, so I need to be here. He said, okay, well, from now on, you can increase that limit and just go to the ATM. And I'm looking at these tellers, And I'm thinking to myself, and they're pretty nice tellers at my local bank. Really nice and professional, very pleasant people, helpful. And they're going to get knocked out of their job at some point. I mean, I think it's going to happen gradually, and I think it's going to happen over time. But just wait until you see the first all digital bank. I actually visited one branch of my bank that I hadn't visited in maybe about 2 years pre-COVID. And I went in there, and they used to have a long, like a long counter to help people where they could probably have about 5 or 6 tellers working at once, helping the public. They got rid of that entire counter, and they put a short counter with just 2 tellers. And they're basically trying their best to funnel people like cattle to the ATMs because they want everything digital. They don't want to pay the employees. They don't want to pay delivery people. They want everything digital. Okay, that's just an expense, and they can't track stuff. And it makes you wonder, too, as far as all these digital transactions, how much of that information can they then take and sell, just for advertising purposes also? They see you spend a lot of your money on handbags, let's say. Your wife spends a lot on handbags. Guess what? They're sending all kinds of stuff to your house for handbags. Every handbag company ever, because they know that because of those numbers on your transactions, that you buy a lot of handbags. I mean, think about it. Google scans your Gmail. Why wouldn't they scan your accounts to know where you're spending your money on things? So, this whole coin shortage thing, not buying it. It's not it. This is just one of those things, and it's working perfectly. If you don't have exact change, please go use your credit card or debit card. And people are doing it like sheep. They're just walking ahead, and it's happening. I would actually love to know, like month by month, how many transactions were conducted, let's say in cash versus credit debit for like all of this month and last month and month before, and just kind of track it back like say 10 years. And I think if you could do that, I think you'd see a gradual reduction in the number of people using cash versus credit debit. But I bet that shortly after COVID started, that actually went up quite a bit, and more people were using cash and credit, like well beyond. See, if this had happened just gradually, I'd say, well, that's just the market being the market. But I think it is being actively manipulated to basically achieve their ends, and basically use it as a surveillance method, a spy method, and most of all, a profitability method. So, like I said, I'm going to leave you with that. And don't forget, if you're into coins at all, you're into metals at all, pick up some pennies, pull out some coppers, because right now, I think the scrap value on them is like maybe 2.7 or 2.8 cents a piece. Then you might pull out some decent stuff on top of that. You might pull out wheat pennies, you might pull out some, other good stuff, some varieties or whatnot. So, keep an eye on this. Just throw them in a bucket. Each one only costs you a cent, and I think down the road you might have a little something there to fall back on. All right, have a good one, guys. I will talk to you later. Bye.